For this video, we're going to review the steps of establishing a diagnosis in the atypical cervicals. When we say that, we mean the occipital-atlantal joint, or OA joint, and the atlantoaxial joint, or AA joint. We'll start with the AA joint because that is very simple. What we're going to do is contact the AA, which is going to be the transverse process of C1. We can do that by just letting our fingers fall into the space between the earlobe and the mandible. Right into there, you'll feel the transverse process of C1 right in there. And then from here, we can bring the head up into flexion, which is going to put the rest of the typical cervicals under tension. And then from here, we're going to check pure rotation, rotation in one direction, rotation in the other direction. And if you have asymmetry of that motion, whichever side has full range of motion is the side that the AA is rotated towards. So if you have full motion to the right, then the AA is rotated right. If you have full motion in both directions, then you have no somatic dysfunction of the AA. When it comes to the OA joint, it's a little bit harder to establish a diagnosis. There's a few methods to do it. We're going to show one version of that. The first thing we're going to do is check for flexion and extension of the OA joint, reminding ourselves that the chin gliding up towards the ceiling, this is extension of the OA joint, and bringing the chin into the table is flexion of the OA joint. So what we can do is check each condyle of the occiput. So if we translate the head translate the head to the right, translating the cervical spine to the left. That's going to glide his head so that we're assessing the right occipital condyle. And from here, that's going to translate to a side bending to the right and rotation to the left of the occiput. So from this position, we can then glide him up into extension. So up here is extended, side bend right, rotated left. If we glide him into the table, that is flexed, side bent right, rotated left. He does not do this motion very well at all. So he does this motion very easily. So we're going to, before we say anything else, we want to assess the other side. Now I'm going to glide his head in the opposite direction. This is creating a side bending to the left and rotation to the right. So as I translate his head this way, now we're going to glide him up into extension, down into flexion. He moves pretty symmetrically with both of those motions, so that tells us that he's got restriction going in this direction, and this was his biggest position of ease. Therefore, his diagnosis is OA extended, side bent to the right, and rotated to the left. Another method to establish this diagnosis is to just check flexion and extension by itself. So to keep the head in relative neutral position, just check extension and just check flexion. In his case, again, he doesn't flex very well. So we know that his OA overall is extended. And then from there, we can take the head and translate it side to side and see which way he prefers. And again, he prefers motion in this direction. So he is, through that method, he would still arrive at OA extended, side bent, right, rotated left. A third method to do this is by static positioning. I don't recommend that you diagnose in this fashion because I don't feel that it's as accurate, but sometimes questions do come up about it on exams in terms of diagnosing this way, so I want you to be able to know how to do it. So what you would do in this position is you would find that transverse process of C1, like we did for the AA, and based off of the two positions on either side, we would get a sense of, is the AA position forward in one side or back on the other side? So if the transverse process is closer to the mandible on one side and closer to the earlobe on the other, then that means that the AA is rotated to the left, which means that the occiput is rotated to the right. Then you can also come underneath the occiput and feel as far up as you can onto the occipital shelf. Based off of your positioning on the occipital shelf, if one side is deeper than the other, then whichever side is the deeper side, that means that the occiput has rotated posteriorly in that direction. And so he's deeper on the right, so again, he would be side bent to the right and rotated to the left. And then your final position would be to look at the general position of the head and see if the chin is jutting out into the table or if the chin is receded into the table. And just based on their static position, you would make an assessment of whether the OA is extended or flexed. Again, this method is not particularly a good way to do it, but sometimes questions do come up about static positioning and its relation to OA diagnosis. I'm going to recommend that we glide to one condyle and check motion one side, and then come to the other side and check motion on that side. And that's how we'll arrive at an OA diagnosis.